The services we provide, put that over there, our recycling services for manufacturers. We've been contracted by Sony, Panasonic, Sharp, Toshiba, et cetera, municipalities, offices, and institutions. Revenue comes from three main sources. We bill for the services when we collect the recycling. We're able to bill for less than recycling companies that promise never to export, because of it's about 10% now that we can find reuse markets for. And then the other 90%, we earn money on raw materials. So it's four sources of income: the fees, the copper and plastic raw materials, wholesale and reuse income. And our business model is progressive, fair trade, diverse, honest, and dependable. Since March 2001, the American Retroworks Inc. brand, Good Point Recycling, which I told you I started because I thought I was going to be a consultant, and that this buying a truck was a wobbly proposition. It's now one of the best regarded electronics recycling companies on the planet. I would vouch for that with a report that just came out yesterday, which names my company as one of the 10 leaders in the world for electronics recycling policy. And I'm now looking for, it's now been the subject of multiple PhD theses, articles, two of Adam Minter's books. And we're now looking for partners not to be scared off by poverty porn. Former regulator, MassDEP, I founded American Retroworks Inc. as a consultancy practice. In 2000, I decided to buy a truck and do the recycling I'd been writing and lecturing about. 20 years, 30 employees, it's now 40 actually. 2 facilities and 100 million recycled pounds later, the company is growing to meet the ever-changing challenges of the e-scrap industry. This picture I am posing in our newest reuse market. I decided to copy what Guayu is doing and start selling parts. Not only Guayu, but what I saw when I brought Adam Minter on 3 occasions to Ghana with me to see Africa's tech sector and repair sector and how they were trading used parts. These parts in my eBay program, I'll show you in a few slides, generated $80,000 per month in the last quarter. Our team, Good Point Recycling, has always been diverse, hardworking, talented, and integrated. Our expansion to Massachusetts promises faster growth and greater returns. We're an important employer of blue-collar workers, women truck drivers, and differently abled Americans. I actually am serving my 4th year on the Vermont State Rehab Council. I would love to tell you which 5 employees are differently abled through the counseling service. But I'm not supposed to do, that's dicey to identify them individually. I will say that I tried the TV parts reuse business for several years with quote normal people, and it wasn't until I got somebody with obsessive compulsive disorder to actually get the critical mass of TV parts photographed and listed for American TV repair shops to bother buying from us from Texas, California, Washington, etc. It wasn't until we had 3,000 parts. Anyway, this is a photograph of that operation. For 2 decades, Good Point has self-financed or conventionally financed our growth, but the constantly changing and evolving electronics recycling marketplace has shaken our competitors. Our opportunities to expand and seize upon market demands. We need more working capital than cash flow will provide. What we have done is evolved. Those CRT desktop monitors I'm bragging about from 2005, by 2012, there was no more market for those. And that's why the plant in Brockton set his, Scrappy Pete set his factory on fire in Brockton because it was full of CRTs. He had gotten used to selling them to remanufacturers, and the remanufacturers were still out there, but they could now find enough CRTs to meet demand out of office buildings in Kuala Lumpur. We, meanwhile, always invested in moving to the next thing. Crystal here does the parts listings once a month, but she's also our favorite truck driver. She's been driving truck for us for 10 years. I had a truck driver quit when I appointed her because he was a male chauvinist and insisted that she wouldn't be able to do it. And I said to him, Kenny, I know from being the truck driver the first 8 years that that's the face and personality of the company that the clients see. And
so Robin, where is this facility located?
this is the one in Middlebury, Vermont.
Okay.
We've moved all the teardown operations down to Brockton, Mass. So what we're counterintuitively competing against for the past 20 years, conventional big shred companies. If you're not allowing yourself to resell parts or TVs because you drank the Kool-Aid and so many of the reuse markets are overseas, then it makes sense to replace your labor with a big shredding machine. And the larger ones in the e-scrap recycling industry cost $20 million for the line. So once you've made a major capital investment based on the poverty porn photos and profiling of the tech sector overseas, you don't want to compete against a company like GoodPoint that's making, $10 a CRT monitor in 2005 when you're shredding them. So most of those shredding companies have now gone out of business, leaving massive piles of hazardous waste here in the US because they deprived themselves of that market. And they are major funders, along with the original equipment manufacturers that don't want to compete with Foxconn, that fund this baloney story. GoodPoint instead has hired, computer programmers, artificial intelligence specialists like Morgan there in the photo, database, solar power nerds, African laptop repair experts. We opened a factory in Mexico, knowing that it's OECD and close enough to the US border that anyone who wants to visit, proper recycling in a place as poor as Africa could do so. And that operation was 20 minutes away from a smelter that was able to use all of the CRT glass. They just closed last month after 13 years due to COVID. They chose not to remain in business because but that's a place I was very proud to work with. I was told early on, well, the maquiladoras in Mexico don't treat women well. And based on being told that, we partnered with a women's cooperative to actually manage the facility. But those ladies had gotten to retirement age and chose to close. Anyway, we're now going into solar panel recycling because we're finding that panels sent to us are still 50% efficient. That's worth replacing in the US, but a 50% solar panel produces more kilowatt hours in Africa than a 100% efficient panel does in Vermont or Massachusetts. Our diverse staff, our willingness to see the tech sector in emerging markets as our friends and equals, our defense of the legitimate geeks and nerds in other nations accused of externalizing waste, not only increased our income, we became the most trusted exporter in the world. Because what had happened, like a war on drugs, is that when the propaganda, financed by the charitable industrial complex, scared everybody from working with Terry Gu or the tech sector, like Joe Benson in Africa, that the quality of parts that those partners were able to buy went down. They were essentially having to buy used electronics in back alleys from people like Scrappy Pete of Brockton, who burned his factory down. Our ability to see those people for what they can do better than we can led us to copy and emulate valedictorians in Africa. Today, one of the programs we copied generates, when I made this slideshow, it's over 50K per month. It was actually 80K, selling used TV parts to USA repair shops. Something that, I took Adam Minter, who wrote the book, to observe and document in Ghana. in 2015. But it wasn't until I got the counseling service, a differently abled guy with OCD, that I could get my staff to list enough and photograph enough of the parts to be worth visiting by US TV repair shops. So SWOT is strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. If you invested in us, strength is we're diverse, we're experienced, we're respected. We've got big contracts, you know, Vermont statewide, one of 4 companies in Massachusetts. We've got momentum, we've got positive credit history, and we're in the best position to advance. Weaknesses are it's all sweat equity capital. I built the 40 employees on credit cards. And because of that, we missed some big opportunities, you know, particularly Retroworks of Mexico. We rely on labor to produce inventory. And although we've got the 80K in parts per month, you know, that are selling from our online sales, the average sale is 6 to 12 months. That part remains in inventory, but I've got to pay the people who are photographing and listing it every 2 weeks. So it creates a cash flow thing, which I would not have recognized until I got my MBA. So be nice to your business school friends. Threats are, you know, big shred, planned obsolescence, and the charitable industrial complex. They continue to generate false, bigoted, and biased news against reuse. You know, it's really a systemic threat. I told you about the Basel Convention. A bunch of whiteys, Europeans and American big shred and original equipment manufacturers wrote a guidance document for the Basel Convention, which most European governments implemented, which replaced intent to dispose with not fully functional, you know, co-opting the Basel Convention to make it appear. And it's because the Africa, Asia, Latin America tech sector, you know, didn't have access to that language, weren't invited to those committees that, you know, rewrote those guidance documents, and they never interviewed them. The new opportunities for the company, we're now on a 5-year state contract in Massachusetts, and I'm basically a fisher jumping in the canoe faster than I can cut bait, my grandpa might have said. We got Boston, Brockton, Brookline, Cambridge. Anyway, we signed up in the last 3 months, basically twice the population of Vermont, and I'm having to hide from contracts now because unless I get capital. We've got a new cell phone app to modernize collections so that, you know, a single place like my old friends where I carpet bagged in Somerville to drive the paper recycling truck Earthworm, rather than have a city of Cambridge, Boston, Somerville, you know, all these metro Boston cities have to have their own collection programs. This cell phone app would allow Earthworm to accept a television or electronic from any resident, you know, because the resident's address is uploaded, and then independently bill it to different municipalities. We're trying to invest in a part sales app to use artificial intelligence, object recognition, so that when you photograph the part, like the photographs of this staff, that's what they're doing in Vermont, that it will automatically recognize, you can see the list of the parts on the bottom right, by recognizing where the chips are, you know, and the brands. And that would allow us to employ lesser educated, more blue collar people, you know, because we can't allow staff to make a typographical error in a part number. You know, we've got $18 million in street value of parts in our plant. Our service fees are doubling with the Massachusetts contract. Online sales are growing exponentially. And meanwhile, you know, going back to my high school 1978 pitch, mining disasters are rising exponentially as more and more of 7 billion people, including, I think, every man, woman, child, and baby in Africa, you know, owns a cell phone. Africa really leapfrogged the hardwire telephone technology. But even with 100% recycling, yeah, the growth in demand is causing more and more externalization of the most polluting industry on the planet. Big opportunities, expanded volume are on top of our client growth. Other recyclers are, that didn't start investing in the flat screen parts reuse are now shipping their flat TVs to me. That will probably allow me to license our software and AI development to other recyclers in the next year, so that I don't have to ship all the flat TVs to Brockton, Mass, or to Middlebury, Vermont. We will actually make the money on the critical mass of users that we've built up with the USA repair sector, and soon the older parts that don't resell for reuse in the USA, getting those parts to our partner in Morocco, Ghana, Guatemala, etc. The chart, that's actually outdated. It's actually doubled since the high point there in 2018. But you can see the growth in our online sales. Traction in parts reuse, in particular, this shows, flattens it out a little bit and shows the doubling, 520,000 year to date in 2019. And again, I've got to pay the people listing these parts every 2 weeks, but the part doesn't sell for 6 to 12 months. So that's why I'm trying to get out of sweat equity. That was from the third quarter. You can see 41.6% increase in total sales, which are mostly the parts, 99% of which are sold to American USA TV repair markets. So if the American repairers are buying this much in parts, just imagine once we get this thing built out in the emerging markets. Yeah, 472% increase in what we pay in taxes and government fees. 32.1% increase in sales over the previous quarter. So the challenge is that we're growing too fast. Number one cause of failure of small business. If we don't manage to get connection with capital or conventional financing, which is very difficult in a pandemic market, it's going to be scary. We need to fund research, the cutting edge development of the computer vision and machine learning, so that the parts can be automatically identified and searchable, if any of you are in programming, by the tech sector or the Geeks of Colors overseas. We're applying also for a Remade grant. We've succeeded since the slide was made in getting PPP and EIDL funding from SBA and seeking angel capital partners. The new opportunities, we see in the future year, if we were to get this investment, that the USA TV repair sales would only be 60% of our revenue, and the growth would be 10% in Asia, 20% in Africa, 10% Latin America. Funny story, Emmanuel Nailite of Ghana. I hired him in 2011. He applied for, he's married to an American in Vergennes, Vermont, and he applied for a position, sent in his resume for a manual labor position. But I read his resume and saw that he'd been electrical maintenance for Nestle in Accra, Ghana. And I said, can you get in here for an interview right away? And held up in 2011, it was a flat TV circuit board that I was just starting to explore, reuse the concept of diverting. And it was so cute. He stammered and said, oh, sir, I couldn't, I'm sorry to let you down, but I couldn't tell you whether that plasma television board is from a Panasonic or a Sony or a Vizio. All I can tell you is that when you see the video chip on the same board as a sound chip and that power supply chip, that it's for flat screen television. I just could not tell you which one. And I said, you're not going to work in manual labor. jump forward. He got a scholarship, went to Georgia Tech to study coding, but he's still on the board of Fair Trade Recycling. And in 2017, Europe's largest e-waste conference invited me to present on a panel with 3 anti-export groups, two big shred companies from Europe and Jim Puckett from the Basel Convention. And I was the 4th speaker. And I basically told the Europeans, the 200 in the audience, said, listen, why are you inviting 4 white guys to tell you about the circular economy? Africans are totally with the circular economy. But as Copernicus and Galileo learned centuries ago, they don't think it revolves around you. Why don't you invite next year an African to tell you what Africa is doing, rather than take any of our white guy words for it? Anyway, it got a huge ripple of laughter, the Copernicus remark. And the following year, this is Emmanuel who did a 30-minute presentation to them, which he wisely started with the history of Ghana's first hydroelectric dam, constructed in 1965, and how many additional hydroelectric dams that Ghana had to borrow to build 4 more based on Africans' use of electricity, and that is the predictor of e-waste. Yeah, we've got great backstops now. Adam Minter, in his last book, the last two chapters of Secondhand, starting with my grandfather, quote, a rich person's broken thing in the next to last chapter. And then his interviews of Africans doing that, falsely accused of importing waste. Dr. Josh Lepowski published Reassembling Rubbish, which was really a backstop for Adam in 2018, so that Adam could push back on his publisher, Bloomsbury, who also published the Harry Potter books. Dr. Josh Goldstein at University of Southern California, writing some very bold pieces accusing the UN and the NGOs of criminal negligence, saying that the republication of, the fake 80% exports or externalized waste stat has continued for so long that it can only be explained by a systemic racial prejudice, only interviewing Africans who are in the scrap sector and posing Western nations as the experts. Awards and certifications, we're ISO certified, R2 certified. Massachusetts state contract was one of the hardest ones. Featured last month on the cover of Recycling Today. I'm gonna plug that one more time. And I was very pleased. One of our friends that we took Adam Minter to interview in Ghana in the tech repair sector, I was so enamored with it that I sent my son while he was in college to go apprentice for 7 weeks under Africa's TV repair sector, so that my son could fly back here and say, yeah, he wasn't burned by acids. But the guy that my son interned under calls me in April saying that his brother, was working on US citizenship, was a taxi driver in New York City since 2011, but he'd lost his taxi recycling income to the pandemic. Anyway, he came up, lived with me for 8 weeks. We trained him as a truck driver. And after we hired him truck driver, he passed his US citizenship in July 7th, my wedding anniversary of this year. So that's it. We're looking for an awesome future. The kid second to the left, he's now 20 years old. That's my son, Jake, who, one of the things I did, I mentioned getting my 19-year-old son the internship in Ghana, but I also really made a practice of bringing my family with me whenever I visited our trading partners and fair trade recycling partners in Peru, in Egypt. That kid I took to Taiwan 3 years ago. My kids have grown up. Vermont's pretty white. It's pretty hard to give them a background in systemic racial profiling. It's pretty hard to educate even, people your age that you've been slipped a Mickey in the externalization which did occur was on mining and extraction, not on reuse, refurbishment, and repair. But yeah, part of my company's blessing has been, to take our kids to meet and see people for what they can do. Having spent all of our vacations, my wife makes fun of me going to TV repair shops and computer and cell phone repair shops in 18 different countries. But, that's part of my message to you guys is what Jim Puckett, I'll just wind up on this. When I confronted Jim Puckett, a documentary was being filmed and about the profiling. It's by a Spanish documentary film. And I, told them to go interview Jim Puckett. He started interviewing with them and then didn't allow himself to be, he denied permission once he saw that they were asking questions about his 80% claims. This is a guy, Bez Action Network. And he came to me and said that the geeks being arrested for exporting, he considered to be collateral damage. That even if I was right, that the exports must continue to be banned because eventually, even if they're reused 15 years, 3 times longer than Americans originally used for 5 years, that 15 years later would be externalized waste. And that the tech sector, if they're being impacted by laws arresting them, he considered to be collateral damage to the necessity to protect Western consciences. And I said to him, Jim, that's true of brand new devices. Brand new devices are going to be disposed of in Africa in 15, 25 years, even if you stop every single reuse sale. And he said, yeah, you're right. So anyway, I encourage you guys to recognize, there's some great documentaries on things like how Keep America Beautiful was created by the packaging industry to divert attention from bottle bills, and the charitable industrial complex, which is what Peter Buffett, Warren Buffett's son, describes it as, can trick really good people through in the same way as, when I went to grad school in Boston and told people I came from Arkansas, that all their questions were based on hillbilly profiling. Don't fall for it, guys. Thanks, Michael. I think I went a little longer than your allotment.
This has been amazingly interesting. Are you willing to take some questions?
Yeah, absolutely. If I can find your Zoom again. Nope.
So you can stop sharing first.
Yeah, I've got to find the Zoom console before I can stop sharing.
Yeah. Listen, I do this all the time in front of the students. So
Trying to find the meeting controls. Because I had moved them to my other monitor. Do you still see this screenshot?
yeah, my guess is it's probably underneath something that you've got on one of your monitors.
Yeah, I'm clicking on it. Here's my Spotify playlist. Oh, it's minimized way over on the other screen.
Oh, okay.
Do you guys see this plastic?
We're still seeing your slideshow.
Yeah, if you see that kid, oh, you're still seeing the slideshow.
Well, we're seeing that you stopped the slideshow, but it's, we're still seeing your PowerPoint.
Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to maximize it. Michael. Okay, do you see yourselves on my share screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Let me just tell you another thing that we're doing is an offset approach. This picture, that's what that's my new engagement. Most ocean-bound plastic is, I just presented this to NERC. You have to spend $10 to get one additional plastic bottle or plastic bag out of Vermont or Boston. You can, with $1, get 10 ocean-bound plastic litter bottles out of the gutters of cities on 7 rivers. So I'm now trying to pitch Keep America Beautiful to put its big engineering money into Keep the Atlantic Beautiful, keep the Pacific beautiful. You know, spend their, you know, when they're faced with plastic bans in the U.S., you know, I'm bird dogging to them. Listen, you can get a lot more if you follow the carbon offset model and pay to get the plastic where it's actually going into the oceans.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's because it follows right up on what Ted Siegler was talking about earlier this week. I can see everyone, which is really the point for me to be able to, you know, have people ask questions. So, how about if I go around and
Can't you take control, Michael?
what?
Can't you take control over my?
I have the gallery up, but I also have. I'm still looking at your original PowerPoint, but I can really minimize that off to the side, and as long as I can see everyone. So what I'm going to do is sort of do a round robin, and you know, I'll call on someone if they have a question, they can ask the question. If not, I'll move on to the next person, and I get sort of the way everyone gets a chance to have a voice. And so, let's see who's first on my screen. Fiona, you're first on my screen. You got any questions?
Yeah, excuse me. One thing that I was kind of thinking about as we were going through this was how I can be a conscious consumer, because I do have all of these Apple products, and when I do dispose of them, or, you know, you trade in back to Apple. So it's kind of thinking about how on a individual level can I become more involved, potentially like investing in your company or just with my own electronic waste.
Yeah, well, the first thing is to not get Dr. Graham Pickering. I think he's at the university. He studied in Vancouver, got his PhD, and I think he's at University of Georgia now. He wrote a very insightful piece on fetishization, which is feeling guilt, you know, which only a wealthy person can afford to feel, for a product based on the fact that it was yours, you know, that it came after you. And Pickering, you know, pointed out that you should probably feel a lot guiltier. I know him because he was citing my blog in his PhD thesis. You should feel a lot guiltier over buying a brand new product. You know, the extraction is where he was saying the extraction, your purchases are most of your pollution, and that the industry has kind of leveraged our guilt with fetishes attached to your past product. And that isn't going to work on 6 out of 7 consumers on Earth, you know, that don't have the luxury to be wealthy enough to feel guilty. So that would be my first advice, is to start measuring your personal impact, not on the waste trail that comes after you, but instead on the mining, energy, and carbon upstream. And come to work for me.
Any openings in Seattle?
Oh, you're the one in Seattle. you're on the front lines with the charitable industrial complex there, the Basel Action Network. I would knock on their door. The leader is still there. He's still promoting a pretty Beverly Hillbillies poverty-born position on the export market, but people have been quitting under him. Who call me afterwards and say, "I'm sorry, I couldn't take it anymore."
Okay. Gabriel, you're up next. You got a question?
Yeah. First of all, I really respect the inversion of carpetbagger, by the way, as a former American South history student. I'm really curious, this might sort of diverge from the course content a little bit, but I'm really curious what you think is the function of this, like the fetishization that you were talking about, and the charitable industrial complex. Like what is their thrust for their narrative?
Well, there was the NGO that lobbied against the annex of the Basel Convention that allows export for the intent to repair and reuse, and it's being funded primarily by manufacturers afraid of Foxconn, their subcontractors becoming their competitors, and it's funded by companies that drank the Kool-Aid and then therefore invested in $20 million shredders to replace labor that then don't want to compete with companies like mine. Oh wait, I think I found this.
So Robin, it's a follow-up because I think it's important for people to know what kind of capture rate you get with shredded material versus manually disassembled.
Manual disassembly is pretty much superior to any invented shredding machines so far. Certainly superior to the first generation in California, where they were shredding CRTs. I believe it was HP, one of the electronics lobbyists, when California, which was the second waste ban on CRTs in the country after mine in Massachusetts, specifically wrote that a CRT could only be exported if it is canceled and ruined and cannot be reused. That led to the Californians, that California had been the biggest market for Terry Gou and the Taiwan-based remanufacturing industries that were buying those things like hotcakes to remanufacture into new TVs for India, Egypt, Brazil, etc. In the late 90s and early 2001s. But California is one of the first places where insidious language got put into the law to say it could only be exported if it isn't going to be reused overseas. And I called, my former counterparts, Matt McCarran, and said, "Why did you guys write that?" And he said, "I don't think it says that." And I sent him a screenshot of his own California law. And he says, "Huh, I thought I'd proofread this. I do not remember ever saying that or writing that in there." Oh, well, it's ratified now. It's the law. Well, that led California to lose, my estimate by 2010 was $80 billion in reuse sales. The prices of reuse in the Northeast, for me, benefited because these factories over there that were refurbishing could no longer buy from the largest supplier, California. So they were being driven increasingly to back alleys, kind of bad exporters saying, "I'm not going to give you these 7 good ones unless you agree to accept 3 bad ones," which is why I tried, with fair trade recycling to get that corrected. But yeah, the biggest thing to get back to is to recognize when you're being given Kool-Aid. Do not underestimate what Vance Packard, and there were 3 seminal books, that I studied in high school, all published in 1960. Rachel Carlson's Silent Spring, which was about toxics, being produced upstream at places like the mining companies. To Kill a Mockingbird, on racism. And the third, that influenced me was Vance Packard's The Waste Makers, where he coined the term planned obsolescence and, wrote a whole book on things manufacturers do to prevent your right to repair. And it sunk in on me because of the influence of, my grandfather, who I spent every single summer on the farm with. So yeah, we just need to, your generation has to be 3.0. The 1.0, you get a book published and pat yourself on the back. 2.0, Ralph Nader or whoever comes and leverages, white guilt to get some new anti-litter, anti-plastic bag patch. You guys have got to be 3.0. Recognize the opportunity to spend $1 to get 10 plastic waste pieces out of a city in an emerging market, rather than spend $10 to make your conscience shinier.
Okay. Milton, it's a good segue for you.
Actually, I'm quite impressed. Congratulations, Robin, for on your holistic view and your practical insight that you provide us about Africa and so on. My question is that some statistics shows that 23% of electronics that is taken to disposal are either functional or economic repairable. For instance, I don't know here in the States, but in many recycle centers that I took my stuff to there, they literally asked me to smash it to make sure it is repairable. And it's kind of scary me. It turns out to be like we have 1.3 billion tons of waste that end up on the landfill, and at the end of this century it could be like 4 billion tons. Robin, it seems that there must be some kind of economic interest in smashing to recycle and what is being termed as circular economy. I would like to know your perspective about it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Well, another thing I'll take credit for, through the blog was in 2011. One of the readers of the blog contacted me. Her name was Katerina Kummer Perry. She was the executive director of the Basel Convention, contacting me from Switzerland and saying, all of my meetings have been set up, to try to, the Basel Action Network is trying to get us to either destroy and shred or to make sure it's 100% fully functional. But I'm reading, what you've been writing, and the more I talk about exploring it, the more attacked I'm being by the lobbyists, because it's the lobbyists who have the power and the control, whether it's to try to control Africans or Taiwanese ability to extend product life by 15 more years, or by the charity. But she funded the study, said, well, let's find out, funded the research into Ghana and Nigeria, the studies in 2011, 2012, which looked at all the brand new equipment being imported to Africa, which was about 20 to 30% of devices that Africans own, and the 70% that was either working or repairable or not. And they found that the brand new equipment failed more often in Africa than the used equipment.
Mhm.
And there's two reasons for that, which I was able to point out to them. One is that, you know, if a sea container full of radios is on a shipping container, you know, bound for Los Angeles, and that container is struck by lightning, shorting out, you know, all of the devices, you know, when it arrives at a Walmart in California, it just takes 2 or 3 consumer refunds before Walmart's contracts say, out of the pool, you know, blow the whistle, get those things off the shelf and force the, you know, usually Chinese company to take them back again. What do you suppose that Chinese company does with them? Ships them to Lagos.
Yes.
So she found that the Africans were the agents and the experts in her study, who the phrase in West Africa is home used, that they're smart, you know, like my grandfather, that you're more likely to have to spend less money and have a working appliance if you purchase from one of the countries with solid state appliances. You know, that because Africa's got a lot of brownouts and, you know, surges, because so many people are accessing internet and electrical devices so quickly that it, you know, outpaces the, you know, in between when you build a new hydroelectric dam, you know, that they wind up shifting the brownouts the way they did in the Ozarks, you know, when my mother was a kid. So yeah, there's some very powerful interests. You know, one of the scariest things is when Africans who actually grew up in an urban area themselves believe that the colonialists are dumping waste. That's been the saddest and most toxic legacy of this, is that when Africans are tricked out of seeing that they, without aid, created the critical mass of users for every African to have a cell phone, invented the, what's it called, the software where cell phone credits are traded like cryptocurrency in Kenya. You know, so it's almost like me feeling shame of hillbilly porn, you know, from Appalachia or the Ozarks, because I myself didn't go through that poverty. And you have more and more, you know, Africans who are drinking the same Kool-Aid. You know, one that I outed who appeared in 6 documentaries in Europe, Michael Anane, was claiming to have been that the Accra city dump and the Korle Lagoon had been created within the past 10 years, and that he had been swimming as a boy in 1999, that it was a lush fishing village. And it is literally the scrapyard in the center of Accra. And it has literally been identified as the city dump for Accra since 1960. You know, but here he became, because he was fitting the charitable industrial complex's scare tactic to force well-meaning environmentalists to feel guilty and to make emerging markets afraid of their own tech sector. You know, and we finally, you know, with Adam Minter and these university professors, you know, calling out, you know, and nicknaming him Fishing as a Boy, you know, to document, because every time a new hydroelectric dam is financed by the IMF or World Bank since 1960, there's multiple consulting studies on consumer demand. The same studies that were done under FDR when he was building hydroelectric dams in the Tennessee River Authority projects that gave electricity to my parents. that there's a ton of secondary research which had to be ignored because people were more likely to react to a photo of kids at dumps, and all the photos are kids. One of the university professors from Syracuse, went and studied that dump in Accra and showed that the average age in the scrapyard was 34. But that all of the photos were of kids that the photographer was posing standing on a junk TV. Junk TV probably imported in 1980. And so that use of imagery, when there's so much, an incredible wealth of background data, really tells a story of systemic, appropriation and unwillingness to see that the Africans hand disassembling electronics, with the exception of wire burning. But most of what is shown in film as wire burning is tire burning because of the traffic jams in Africa and the massive tire piles. And that Africans do have a legitimate need to burn tires that become breeding grounds for mosquitoes, that carry malaria in urban markets. But that the tire burning has been pitched to always be about wire burning, as if most of these pillows of smoke were from the electronics recycling rather than from tire burning. And that, as Michael mentioned with the shredding, the hand disassembly is far superior in terms of the quality. I saw in 2003, my first trip to China, that they were hand grading, electronics has a triple wash smelting process for copper, because 0.1% impurity in a copper wire can reduce the efficiency of an electronic device by 30%. So in Asia, they've got these, we've got a few of them here, but they don't send it all the way back to the primary smelter or secondary smelter the way Americans recycle it, but they were segregating out that electronics copper to go directly to the third wash, highest value added copper smelter. And that's why they were able to outpay American recyclers that were running them through shredders. We also observed in 2002 that people, it's not just Terry Gu, Simon Lin is another one. If you've heard of a small company called Acer, he was an original contract manufacturer for IBM, as was Lenovo. A lot of the stories of these companies in 2000, to 2005, they were hired to assemble the products. But by 2005, they were like, Dad, can you just give me the car keys? IBM let go of Lenovo. So I'm hoping that thing will happen in Africa. And that's why it's really tragic to see the best and brightest, Africans who would have been at MIT or working as an engineer at Boeing, had they been born in the United States in 1980s, are instead master level board repair technicians reassembling cell phones, who created the infrastructure that leapfrogged telephones and put telephones in the hands of, it's got to be close to 99% of Africans. If you count the ones that own 2 cell phones, they often will have a second. I don't know if in your family they have a second flip phone as a backup.
Yes.
Yeah,
Definitely.
because the smartphones they like, but the enhanced display causes the battery to need to be recharged more often. So a lot of Africans will have a second flip phone that will go 2 days without a charge.
Well, thank you. Haven, you're next.
Hi, I actually just left a job at Apple working with technicians and watching them do repairs. So this has been thoroughly fascinating. And I don't know, getting to know about like Africa's tech industry as well. like recycling TVs and phones and what have you, has been kind of eye-opening for me. But yeah, sorry, a question. I do have questions. My questions are like running through my head. I guess off the back of what you were just talking about, so obviously like they're doing recycling of products and devices in Africa. The devices that we're producing here in the States, like you can really only go to a couple of places to get them repaired. And obviously that's probably done quite a bit on purpose. But I wonder if part of it is like proprietary technology. Do you think there's a way to like do repairs sufficiently well without getting your hands on like the same stuff that like Apple has kept for themselves, or whatever it happens to be?
Thanks, Haven. Well, one of the speakers Michael might consider inviting, or two of them, Gay is with repair.org, and she's drafting the right to repair laws that would prevent some of the things Apple does, like changing the end of the plug every generation, you know, playing musical chairs so that, you know, because the cord they make very thin. So that's often the first part to go bad. But then they arrest people who import, you know, the proprietary cords for their new devices that are manufacturing the replacements in China. They even got the Florida AG's office to go and help them arrest Americans who were reselling Chinese-made Apple replacement cords. So Gay is drafting the right to repair. Nathan Proctor at US PIRG is putting PIRG's influence behind it. And it's been a good opportunity for me, you know, since they are so aggravated by the use of the erosion of what's called first use. There's patent law and there's trademark law. And, you know, just read the Wikipedia difference article between the two of them. And patent law, you know, which goes back to the 1800s, pretty much tells the manufacturer, say, you've got two choices. You can lease it and get your money slowly, month by month, in which case you can control the rights to repair it because you, the manufacturer, own it until the last payment on the lease. But if you prefer to get all the money up front by selling it, the way Henry Ford envisioned it and capitalized Ford Motor Company, then the first use, the consumer you sold it to owns it. You don't own it. But what they've done is, because more and more electronics have a software component, you know, Bill Gates, I like Bill. I think he probably suffers a lot of guilt from having done this. But software is treated under trademark law. And trademark you continue to own for a fixed period, whether or not you sold it. And so the software, they're trying to get software to everything, because Walt Disney Company has lobbied for decades to get the trademark laws extended so that nobody can copy Mickey Mouse. So Disney has put massive money in extending, you know, what used to be a 20-year trademark period into, I don't know what it is now, 40, 60. And then the hardware manufacturers put in software that they don't allow you to replace. So anyway, the right to repair law, I don't know if it's the correct, you know, if the wording is right, but I think the conversation that it's creating is correct. you know, a few of us, like Michael and I, remember the Warranty Act of 1975, which was written based on PERG, Ralph Nader having read Vance Packard's book, The Wastemakers. You know, it doesn't force you to warranty a product, but it does force you, if you say that it is under warranty, you can't mickey around, which is what the manufacturers were doing.
Yep. Okay, Emmanuel, you're next.
Oh, thank you. So actually, I didn't present myself. I'm Manuel Ruiz. I live in Manchester, New Hampshire. I come from Rwanda, in Africa too.
Beautiful country.
In Rwanda. So my question is about collection of materials to recycle. So do you mind if you talk about a little bit about how you get the materials that you recycle, and at which level you recycle? Probably you do dismantling and extract those small particles, making the materials, or you just refurbish materials and brought back to the market.
Sure, Happy. I got to visit Rwanda in 1984. I did my language training in Bukavu on the then Zaire side.
Yeah.
But I got to see the gorillas in Rwanda. And
That's nice.
it was amazing. Yeah, you know, going back to when I had my truck driving license, from when I was, you know, driving a paper recycling truck while going to grad school at night in Boston. And I was, after Mass DP, had some consulting opportunities and was driving the truck down. What I did was I would just stop at, you know, places like Brattleboro, Vermont, on my way down to Massachusetts in the truck, and tell them, actually, sometimes I would pretend to be lost. I would, you know, like tell Hartford, I'm on my way to Brattleboro to pick up TV. You know, that would get me introduced to the recycling person that I was meeting in Hartford on my way to Brattleboro. And say, yeah, I'm going down to Brattleboro to collect their TVs for recycling. Do you ever get those? And every solid waste district that I would stop at would say, oh, we're never going to get the funding that places like California has. You know, my board would never approve it. And I would just say, oh, no, that's not what Brattleboro is doing. They're just charging $20 a TV. They keep 10, they give 10 to me. And the districts, you know, the very first couple would say, oh, well, people will never pay that. And I'd say, you know what? They wouldn't if they were throwing out a TV every 6 months. But if they're only throwing out a TV or a computer once every 5 or 10 years, it's kind of like, I don't remember what I paid to cross the George Washington Bridge. You know, I'm not going to avoid going to New York. Just try it. People will do it. And then more and more of them started just, you know, accepting $20, putting 10 in their own operations, paying Good Point Recycling, you know, the other 10. And that's how I built the business, from being all by myself, the lone truck driver consultant. I'd park the truck down in Massachusetts, put on my suit and tie, and do consulting for a few days. And then at first I would deliver them to another electronics recycler who was a TV repairman in Massachusetts that I was consulting for, to get him onto state recycling contract. And his staff would take apart the stuff. And then we kind of flipped. I became the reuse expert. You know, he was a TV repairman and I was the guy. So I would deliver the Vermont junk, you know, which was 90% of the material Africa wouldn't want, you know, Taiwan wouldn't want. Deliver that 80 to 90% to him, but buy from him back the desktop monitors that I knew they were remanufacturing in Asia. Then over time, he sold his company to a big shred company based in California, and they fired him after 2 years. And then they put in a big shredding machine in Holliston, Massachusetts. And so he called me and said that they'd laid off all of his very best Central American demanufacturing staff. So they came to work for me. So that's kind of the story. Some interesting things that happened along the way, if you look up on Wikipedia or other articles, what's called the white box computers that Michael would remember. In the 1990s, the personal computer, what Microsoft and Intel decided, let's just not do what Apple's doing and try to hold on to the manufacturing. We'll make our money on the Microsoft operating system and the Intel circuit board. And that we can produce more efficiently. And that caused the IBM modeled computer sales to go up 10 times what Apple was, because they encouraged mostly Taiwanese, but the Taiwanese were carpetbagging to Southeast China and to Malaysia and Indonesia to start factories as well. They took the same strategy of, you make 80% of the money on 20%, the software and the printed circuit board. During those years, when Ban was accusing the Chinese of being primitive, I was making 75 cents a piece for the 3-inch floppy drives from a factory in Kunming, China. Because Dell and HP and everybody had decided those were passé and had closed down their contracts. But some of us still had, our thesis term papers backed up on those. So you had the option when you bought a new computer to have, you had to affirmatively request the 3-inch floppy drive. And there was a period of about 5 years where 100% of those were remanufactured from American recyclers that did hand disassembly. And they were reassembled in Kunming, China, and sold to Dell and HP. So people who had installed a shredder, to make this all into little pieces, were losing out. It was also true of ATX power supplies, the heat sinks, those aluminum heat sinks. The Chinese scrappers, everybody was accusing them of overpaying versus American shredders based on externalization of waste. But it was actually outpaying American shredders because of the 80-20 rule, that 20% of the components that they were reusing and remanufacturing, and they were only scrapping, by hand in a more clean manner, the other 80%.
Okay. We have time for one more question, and who has a burning question? Just popcorn in.
I guess if no one else is gonna go, I'll go. This is maybe, I guess the one thing I'm sort of left wondering is what do we do with the electronics that can't be repaired or reused? What is the most responsible way to deal with those parts?
Well, the way I explain it is electronics are kind of like your blue box recycling. If the water bottle and the newspaper and the cat food can were all attached by 16 different types of screw. And you had to, and that the recycler, instead of just sorting them on a MRF line, had to hand disassemble all those things. What's inside an obsolete device isn't a major mystery. Even things like the circuit board have got they're sold to smelters because they've got 50 times more gold than gold ore mined from the ground. The copper pieces from it have got 50 times more copper than copper in rocks mined from a mountain. And it's really just a matter of getting them taken apart. Yeah, the whole thing, as I've been pounding on, shouldn't be racialized. I would assume if I see a picture of a Nigerian hand dismantling a VCR, that he's dismantling my landlord's VCR after 20 years of maintenance, repair, and reuse. And I would like to, get this offset campaign, directed at used CRTs in Africa as well, because that's going to be a heavy lift because of the expense of that. But yeah, the circular economy is not revolving around us. It's not Ptolemy. It's a lot more complicated and a lot more interesting. And that the people involved in it that have been called primitive are fascinating. And yeah, don't bogart the electronics in the circular economy would be my takeaway.
Okay. Well, thank you, Robin. This has been great. It's been really interesting for me too. So I really appreciate the time. And
Yeah, if anybody wants to visit us, I'm down to Brockton, Massachusetts about every 2 or 3 weeks. Up in Middlebury, Vermont, that's a much cleaner, well-lit. We're handling the 20% worth 80% of the value in Middlebury. But any of you that want to visit or apply,
okay.
or do what I can't do, go find a big investor. That would be.
Okay. Well, I just want to speak to the students before we break off. And so you can stay on if you want to hear about the assignment.
That's okay. I'll let you all go.
Thank
Okay.
you, Robin. This was great.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Thank you, Robin.
you.
Thank you.
Okay. Someone's going to have to reach out to Stefan because he had to get off. And so I just want to bring up something. You have an exercise to do before we meet tomorrow. And tomorrow we're gonna start at 9:30 instead of 9 to give you a chance to work on this individually and as a group. And so let me just share a screen here. Okay, it's a little exercise. You've seen today's topics, blah, 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 blah. Okay, does everyone see that class exercise? It's actually on the lesson plan, and I just sent you an announcement, okay, with it on it too. And so there's 2 places. So we'll start 9:30 tomorrow. You're gonna do something on your own, and then you're gonna get together as a group before class, either later today or tomorrow morning. So you're going to give a challenge, okay? Each of you are consider or assume that you're a restaurant owner running a restaurant of 150 seats. Your branding for your restaurant is farm to table, so it sort of has that sort of maybe greenwash little bit of being sustainable. The restaurant is actually situated in a neighborhood in Lowell, Massachusetts, which is very minority diverse neighborhood. Your restaurant has been recycling cardboard, which is put into a small compactor behind the restaurant and collected by the same small mom and pop waste collection company that collects your waste. Now you've decided to separate your organic materials so that it can be collected and diverted from disposal to a composting option. So what you need to do is you need to develop a detailed decision tree to outline everything you would need to do in order to change your restaurant's operation to make this diversion of organics a reality. Okay. Now, the steps in a decision tree should be put in the most logical order. That is, you do this first, and you do this second, and you do this third, and so forth and so on. But since I've done a lot of strategic planning for organizations, I have something what's called inverse strategic planning thinking. which you can also approach the same way, is where you start with your organic material from a restaurant being disposed or tipped on the pad at the composting facility. And then you ask what needs to happen before that, and then what needs to happen before that, and then what needs to happen before that. And pretty soon you're back at your restaurant, and at your outside of your restaurant, then you're inside your restaurant. Okay, so you can do it either way. It doesn't matter how to create a decision tree. You're going to join up in teams, and one person on your team will, on a document as you work together, develop the decision tree and be prepared to present it to the class. And here are the teams. Okay, so as I said, this is both on the lesson plan for today as well as what I just sent you as an announcement. But we have Emmanuel, Kristen, and Claire as one team. Ryan, Esperanza, and Stefan is another team. And Ryan Esperanza, you should reach out to Stefan because he is off, he's left the class. And then there's Gabriel, Courtney, and Milton. And then Carolina, Ashley, and Haven. And so there's 4 teams. We'll call this team 1, Emmanuel's team 1, Ryan's team 2, Gabriel's team 3, and Carolina's team 4. Okay. And so you can do some work on your own. You can, everyone has access to Zoom. You can create your own Zoom meeting with your team members. Okay. And so actually, why don't we start at 10? It'll give you a little more time. Okay. So we're going to start at 10. It says 9:30. Okay. But we're going to start at 10 tomorrow because that'll give you time to both think this out individually as well as work as a team to come up with a shared decision tree. Okay. Now, this process is the same process that any business needs to go through to determine to make a SOP change, a technical change, a supply chain change. I mean, it's the same type of thing. We're going to do this. But then the question is, how are we going to do it? Okay, so the decision is we're going to separate our organics and we're going to basically send them to a recovery facility, not to a landfill. That's the what. What you're trying to figure out is the how. Okay, and do it in a logical fashion. Any questions?
Sorry, I have a question. My name is not listed there. Which team should I join?
Fiona, I am so sorry.
It's okay.
Why don't we just put you on, why don't we put you on Ryan's team in case no one can get hold of Stefan? Okay, sorry, I missed that.
Okay.
Okay, so Fiona, it's Ryan Esperanza, Stefan, if we can find the wayward boy, and you, Fiona. Okay? Any other questions? And I apologize. I don't know why, however, I know there's 13 people in this class. This adds up to 12, what I'm looking at.
I had a quick question, Michael.
Yeah.
Not on this, but on our materials generation. You mentioned a 2-week period. Once we've gotten to that 14-day, can we stop?
Yes.
Or do you, okay. I wasn't sure if it was between specific dates or just 2 weeks.
Even if you end up with 10 days, that's okay. I just wanted to get more than 1 week because you sort of get into a cycle of weekends and weekdays, right?
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay. I'm going to stop there and I'll see you tomorrow at 10 and I'll send out another announcement just so Stefan sees it that I'm correcting the 9:30 to 10 o'clock. Okay, so I'll see you at 10 tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.